period between 1960 and 1980 was one of the most tumultuous in American political history. Of the 5 presidents who served in the White House during that period, only 3 were elected. One assumed office following an assassination, another after a resignation. Cold War tensions, the Vietnam War, Watergate, and the energy crisis of the 70s all added to a general sense of unease in America. Along with political upheavals, this was a period of extraordinary social change in the United States. The civil rights movement was beginning to pick up momentum, and suburban America was growing at a rapid pace. Even though the United States was the richest country in the world, there was still a large segment of the population living in poverty, and the U.S. economy, which had generated unprecedented prosperity since World War II, was experiencing a slowdown. It was against this backdrop that the 1960 presidential campaign occurred, pitting Vice President Richard M. Nixon against Massachusetts Senator John F. Kennedy. In the beginning of the campaign, Vice President Nixon had a definite advantage. He had served 8 years under an immensely popular president, Dwight Eisenhower, and was much better known than Kennedy. Kennedy faced another problem. He was a Catholic in a country where prejudice and convention meant that no Catholic had ever been elected president. On the evening of September 26, 1960, Nixon and Kennedy faced each other in the very first televised presidential debate. Those who heard the debate on the radio judged it a draw, but the larger television audience rated Kennedy the winner. Nixon, coming off a recent illness, seemed haggard and drawn, but Kennedy appeared well-rested and confident.
Nixon's problem is that he was far less savvy about television than Kennedy was. Kennedy had already learned that the camera was his friend, and so he had makeup applied before he appeared on camera. Nixon refused to have makeup. He thought it was apparently unmanly or something of that kind.
Mr. Nixon, would you like to comment on that statement?
I have no comment.
This debate not only changed the course of the 1960 election, but it signaled the emergence of television as a powerful new force in American politics.
Because it's Columbus Day, we ought to have a speech in Italian.
Throughout the campaign, the energetic young Kennedy and his stylish wife Jackie captivated the public and the press. In the end, Kennedy won the election by one of the most narrow margins in history, and the influence of television may very well have given him the extra votes he needed. At his inauguration, Kennedy challenged all Americans to help reach the new frontier, the name he gave to his program for America's future.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Kennedy embodied the anything was possible spirit of the day. One of the most successful programs Kennedy established was the Peace Corps. Thousands of idealistic Americans heeded his call and became teachers, healthcare workers, and technicians in less developed countries. The space program would also become a cornerstone of the Kennedy administration. After Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit the Earth in 1961, Kennedy vowed to put a man on the moon before the end of the decade. In 1962, astronaut John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And in 1969, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first men to walk on the moon, making Kennedy's pledge a reality. During his election campaign, Kennedy had also promised to address the economic recession and get America moving again. Aided by a Democratic Congress, Kennedy pushed laws that would help stimulate the struggling economy. Yet despite the Democratic majority, much of the power in Congress rested with a powerful conservative group of Republicans and Southern Democrats. They opposed Kennedy's main economic proposal, an across-the-board tax cut that would give people more money to spend, thus stimulating economic growth. They feared that if taxes were cut, the government would not have enough money and our national debt would increase. The Southern conservatives also influenced how Kennedy chose to handle the growing civil rights movement. Kennedy moved cautiously, limiting his actions to presidential orders that didn't require congressional approval. He established the Committee on Equal Employment Opportunity to ensure that all races had equal access to government jobs. He ordered the Interstate Commerce Commission to desegregate bus routes in the South. At the same time, Attorney General Robert Kennedy was involved in helping black students gain admittance to 2 previously all-white colleges. In 1963, pressured by public outrage over televised acts of brutality against protesters, Kennedy proposed a comprehensive Civil Rights Act that would make racial discrimination in public accommodations illegal and would empower the Attorney General to intercede in public school desegregation. Southern conservatives mobilized against it, and Kennedy's Civil Rights Bill quickly became stalled in Congress. In addition to the civil rights crisis at home, Kennedy's attention was also focused on a number of overseas incidents that were a direct result of the ongoing Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Shortly after he became president, Kennedy approved the invasion of Cuba by Cuban nationals who wanted to overthrow Soviet-backed communist dictator Fidel Castro. The Kennedy administration supported the overthrow attempt as a means of containing the expansion of communism. But when Kennedy refused to approve U.S. air support, the invasion at the Bay of Pigs was doomed, and the incident turned into a political fiasco. Cold War tensions escalated even further in June 1961. The communist government of East Germany, backed by the Soviet Union, constructed the Berlin Wall in East Berlin to stop its citizens from fleeing to democratic West Berlin. When Kennedy did not order American troops to tear down the wall, the Soviet Union felt that they could challenge the United States.
Remember, both of them were armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons. They were on a constant state of ready alert, which meant that for the Soviet Union to put up a Berlin Wall meant that it was risking that entire balance of terror. For the United States to attempt to tear down the wall would have also meant a possibility of affecting that balance of terror.
In October 1962, the U.S. and the Soviet Union went to the brink of nuclear war over the Soviet placement of nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the American mainland. Kennedy's response of a limited shipping blockade instead of an invasion of the island allowed time for cooler heads to prevail. Historians agree that Kennedy's firm stand against the Soviet Union prevented what could have been World War III and marked his finest hour as president. Despite the problems getting his New Frontier programs through Congress, most Americans thought Kennedy would be re-elected. But it was not to be. On November 22, 1963, Kennedy was assassinated while riding in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas. Despite speculation about a conspiracy, an exhaustive investigation by Chief Justice Earl Warren and the Warren Commission concluded that one man, Lee Harvey Oswald, acted alone in killing Kennedy. Historians still debate whether Kennedy's presidency was a success or failure, but his greatest legacy may have been infusing the country with optimism and a sense of hope for the future.